Well, welcome to Roundtable, and I'm delighted to be with Richard Garcia from Shell and Jacques van Kouwenberg from Coca-Cola. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, you both have very interesting careers, and perhaps starting with you, Jacques, where did it all start for you?
Well, it started a long time ago, Dan. I started, funnily enough, in the petrol industry. I started working for Esso, ExxonMobil, first in Europe, then in the US. And I was 11 years with them, always in the retail part of the business, retail and convenience retail. And then after 11 years, I went to Coca-Cola and got the opportunity to work on several marketing roles, general management roles, and then built up the global customer group, basically looking specifically after petrol customers, and within that Shell especially. That was about 10 years ago, with Shell really developing its global capabilities and wanting to develop global relationships with some of their suppliers.
And you've seen it from both sides of the fence.
Absolutely, and that is how I got to know Richard, which is now just over 10 years ago. And we've been working together ever since.
Well, Richard, you're sitting here, a very senior global role with Shell. Did you imagine that when you first started out in life?
Well, as a matter of fact, I started in soft drinks. I started with the 7-Up Dr. Pepper company in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico. And from there, I moved into Warner Lambert Consumer Products. And I had the opportunity to have leadership roles in the US, in Asia, and Central America. And then I moved to Shell to understand the world of retailing. And since then, Jacques and I have been connected.
And obviously, you have quite a bit of trust because of that relationship. Do you think trust is an important dynamic in business as well as personal relationships these days?
I think it is a fundamental aspect of business. You do not trust change to companies that you do not trust. And something that we can say about the history of Shell in convenience retailing is that it has evolved through a number of changes. We have acquired companies, we have sold operating units, we have seen transformation of our offer. And since I have been part of this convenience retailing world, I have to say that that's probably the ever-going aspect of the relationship with Jacques and Coca-Cola. And also the ability to innovate and to change directions when it's needed, which you know that in marketing is fundamental.
And do you agree with that, Jacques?
No, absolutely. I think trust is key, and we have that. We've had that for a very long time in our relationship. And what you see through that is a very open sharing of strategies. We basically share all our strategies in a very open way with Shell, and likewise in the other sense as well. To then be able to go into a process where you start thinking about how can we connect these strategies. So the more open Shell is about their strategies and their future plans, the more we can start thinking how can we support Shell in its ambitions, in its goals, and what's the best way to do that within Coca-Cola globally, working with Coca-Cola Company and our network of bottling companies. And so that is in a very open dialogue, this happens. And Shell has always had the courage, I would say, to listen to us and to just test whatever recommendation we make, and then look how that works and adapt it. And I think the relationship has evolved, yes, it continues to evolve. Richard and I, as we said, have known each other for over 10 years now. But there's a lot of commonalities, if you will, between Shell and Coke. And if you look at what Sarah and Val are doing today together, I think they are really very much trying to connect the strategies, understanding the consumer better, understanding the shopper that arrives at the Shell station and at a Shell store, what that shopper's needs are and how can we fulfill those needs, what are the key occasions, how can we go after those key occasions, how can we better basically address those shopper needs. Today we have an incidence level or number of people buying a drink which is 20%, which means that out of 100 people arriving at a gas station, only 20 will buy a beverage. And you might think that's okay, but I think that in a relationship with Shell, we're really trying to figure out how do we convince the other 80%, which are currently not drinking or not buying a drink, to pick up a drink when they visit a Shell outlet.
And Richard, there's obviously a lot of work going on in your team, and Jacques mentioned his team with Val Quinn, your team with Sarah Llewellyn. What's happening in the markets? Are we seeing some real progress there in terms of some of these plans actually hitting the road?
The missions of our customers are changing, and that figure of 20% of incidents that Jacques mentioned is still a lagging reflection of what this channel was during the last 20 years. But customers are demanding a more encompassing, wider experience that connects more with the way they live their lives. Channels of distribution are blurred. People are living their life and trying to fulfill their needs as they go along, because time has become probably the most valuable asset in our lives. And the interesting factor about beverages is that there is no reason why every single customer that comes to our door cannot have one of them. And what poses us a significant challenge, because the work that Val and Sarah are doing needs to be balanced between the realities of sales targets that we have committed to our shareholders that needs to be delivered today, and the long lens view that we need to have in everything we do that allows us to actually have that incidence in the 50, 60%, which is actually in the place that it should be. It will take some time. But one important aspect of the business that is happening on the ground is this connection between the way that we are embracing category management as a discipline right now, and the way that that goes through the organization, and the connection that exists between our local operating units and the Coca-Cola bottlers.
I think this is a crucial topic, isn't it? I mean, what should the aspiration of the forecourt be for the consumer's new needs? Because those needs, as we've discussed, are evolving very rapidly. I mean, we've seen a huge shift in shopping habits in many developed markets around the world in the last 2 or 3 years, haven't we? Consumers moving away from the big boxes towards the small boxes, which is good for Shell, isn't it, Richard?
It definitely is, and I think that if you go back to the last couple of decades and how this business has evolved, it has moved pretty much from trying to sell more fuels to creating a site experience that is so pleasant that is conducive to selling more fuels, and that's the moment in time that we are right now. The reality is that we have the opportunity of billions of transactions that we generate every year, and learning from those in ways that we can connect in a more meaningful way with our customers is going to be a game changer during the next decade.
Yeah, we always start shopper back, so trying to understand what are the needs, the wants, the expectations from that shopper when he enters that store. And then we work back to develop an offering that meets those needs as good as possible. And in our relationship, and the approach of Coca-Cola is a category approach. And then within the category, the brands have to do their job basically to earn their place in the cooler or on the shelf. But you cannot force your will onto the consumer. So you have to start by understanding what the consumer and shopper wants, and then work back from that and develop something that meets those needs.
Just thinking about things from an industry perspective, I mean, is this kind of relationship something that the industry should be watching with interest? I mean, is this kind of deep strategic relationship between two global companies something the industry can learn from, do you think, Richard?
I think in many ways, one way or another, companies are doing this already. I think the consistency in the relationship between Shell and its global partners, such as Coca-Cola, is probably the differentiation factor. In our case, you mentioned the presence that both companies have in many markets. I think that this is the moment in which this global relationship becomes even more relevant, because even though we do business as Shell in 80 markets, the reality is that as Shell Select, we do business only in 36 markets. So we still have an immense amount of headroom that we need to achieve. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we collaborate with partners that can join us on that journey. If you look at emerging markets such as China, India, Indonesia, Those are markets in which we are just scratching the surface of a potentially big opportunity. However, when you look at a partner like Coca-Cola, they have actually gone through potentially waves of change that have taken them further than where we are. And that's why we do believe so greatly that this type of global level and regional level relationship needs to happen.
And Jacques, you subscribe to that as well, would you?
Absolutely, and I would add to that, we talked about trust before a few minutes ago. I would also add focus as a key element. And I think that Richard and his team have done a fabulous job in that area of really being focused on what are the key growth opportunities at store level in different categories, and then within the beverage category, what choices do we make and where do we want to go for? And that brings a high level of clarity, strategic clarity, in the choices that Shell wants to make globally, which allows us then as a global supplier to go and locally adapt this.
Must be very satisfying to hear that, Richard. You're on the right track.
Yes, we are. 2014 was a remarkable year, our best year in history, and actually 2015 started also quite strong. It's a reaffirmation that we are going in the right direction, but it's also a significant amount of responsibility to stay connected with what we committed to do and to continue stretching the boundaries of the performance and the support that our local operating units needs to receive along this journey. The collaboration with Coke is a perfect example of that. In our category management platform, obviously, we look after a number of categories, but beverages right now is leaps and bounds ahead of the others. And we are going to continue fostering from that experience ideas and successes that we can take into as many markets as possible, as fast as possible.
So Richard, thinking about what you've just said, I mean, how do you balance the global strategy with the needs of the local Shell teams in markets? How's that work?
Well, first of all, there's no global strategy that is successful if it doesn't happen through the successful implementation at a market level. So to us, it's a very simple answer. Markets are first. We operate as one team. We meet frequently. We exchange ideas, and we have developed a very strong category management platform enabled by technology that allows us actually across market to have seamless flow of communication, especially the population of the best practices and the different activities that are associated to the global strategy. At the end of the day, the global strategy is going to continue evolving based on the successes and learnings that we have in our individual operating units. And in that sense, to us, it's incredibly important. And the same goes to the collaboration with suppliers such as Coke. We are asking from them exactly the same level of commitment to local delivery and execution that we are trying to instill in our organization.
So that balance, absolutely vital to Shell, and clearly, I would imagine, to Coca-Cola too.
No, absolutely. As Richard said, the strategy can only work if it's locally implemented in a store. The moment of truth is at the end is the transaction that happens in the store. As I said before, Richard and his team make it relatively easy for us by providing that clarity on what to focus on. For example, one of the focus areas is the meal occasion. With that, we can go and work and say, well, how do you drive meals with beverages in London or in Kuala Lumpur or in Santiago de Chile? You've got these meal occasions everywhere there. The pack that you are going to recommend to be relevant in that occasion may not be the same pack, probably is not the same pack. It may be a different brand. So all of that is where you need to tap into the local knowledge of the local teams of how to bring that in the most relevant way to the shoppers in those environments.
And it's getting that detail right, which makes it a truly effective global strategy.
Correct. You've got clarity at the global level on the priorities, and then you need to locally adapt to make it work in every given market.
Jacques, thank you very much for joining us on Roundtable. Richard, thank you too, and thanks for watching.
My pleasure.